All right, Robert.
Okay, I'd like to call this meeting to order. If you would please see the flag, if you can, in the background, and let's do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. May we have the roll call, please?
Certainly. Mr. Fernandez? Mrs. Gaddy?
Here.
Mr. Kraus?
Here.
Mrs. Manini?
Here.
Mr. Masiello?
Here.
Mrs. Romano?
Here.
Mrs. Zugabe?
Here.
Thank you, Ms. Lively. I'd like to get a motion for accepting the agenda
So moved.
by Ida, and second.
Maggie, second.
Maggie, second. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we have motion granted 7-0. We're having a energy performance ground.
We lost Robert.
Do you want me to
Lost
take over?
Robert.
You want me to take over for now?
Okay. Well, should he be on?
I think he was going to introduce me to introduce Michael. So he must have hit a button and is off.
Okay, so should we wait for Robert to come back?
I don't know.
Mrs. Eckert, would you want me to just read what item 5 is, and then Mr. Sano can take it from there?
Sure.
Okay. Item number 5, energy performance contract, ground mount solar panel project, Tompkins Cove Elementary School. Mr. Sano, can you please provide us additional details?
Yes, Mr. Fernandez. I just wanted, let's see, this is the second part of our second EPC. About 4 or 5 years ago, we had our first EPC that dealt with a lot of the pneumatics and lights and whatnot throughout the school. That was about a $7 million project. Our second EPC that we started 3 years ago, we did a,
Mike, Robert
Yes.
would like us to wait until he's on. He's trying to get his tablet went down. He's trying to get on his desktop.
okay, no problem.
Okay.
I'm not, as long as we're waiting, I'm not seeing the agenda, which I normally do. That usually puts it up next to the, everybody's pictures, etc. Is there any way I can get to the agenda here?
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Oh, Robert's
All right.
back.
He's on. He's just muted. Robert, you're muted. There you are.
Got it. All right. I'm sorry, everybody. I had a malfunction. Can you hear me?
Yes.
We can. We can't see you, but we can hear you.
All right. So I introduced Mr. Shalali, but I didn't hear anything after that.
Okay.
We didn't hear you introduce Mr. Shalali. So.
Okay. Well, all right. Tonight's presentation is going to be an energy performance contract for ground mount solar project at Tompkins Cove Elementary School. And I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Shalali, architect's firm, if he's available.
Thank you, Mr. Masiello. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen now so that people could see the presentation. Hopefully, that's working for everyone? Can you see the first slide?
No,
No,
Do I have to click the present now button?
Okay,
no, Michael
No.
does. You have to give him permission to share.
All right, go ahead, Mike. I give you permission.
We need tech. Oh, there we go.
You have my verbal. You want it in writing or? I see
So
it.
can people see that slide, that first
Yes.
slide?
I
yes,
see Ken.
okay.
Excellent.
I
Well,
see your
thank you.
firm's logo, but I don't see, okay, let's go.
Thank you, Mr. Masiello, Superintendent Eckert, members of the board, and residents. As Mr. Seno had said before, North Rockland Schools is nearing completion of their second energy performance contract, or EPC. Back in 2013, we completed the first EPC, which totaled approximately $7 million and delivered a new roof on the high school, new boilers, lighting controls, and many other energy-saving capital improvements at no direct cost to the taxpayers in North Rockland. This second EPC totals $12.4 million and includes additional boilers, cogeneration, HVAC equipment, LED lighting, and over 1 megawatt of solar power on 5 buildings. Again, at no direct cost to the local taxpayers. All of these savings are guaranteed by the energy services company building these projects, Siemens. Tonight, we've been asked to present our latest project, Phase 2 of the current EPC. This project delivers about 1.3 megawatts of solar power on a ground-based solar array located behind the former Tompkins Cove school building of Buckberg Road. The site totals over 29 acres, and we will be using approximately 5.5 acres for the solar array. This first image shows part of the site of the former school building, the array, and some proposed landscaping. We initially presented this project to the town of Stony Point in January and to this board last March. Since then, we've been hard at work developing the designs to determine the energy production and verify the size of the array. We have surveyed the property, analyzed the shading and yield to determine power production, coordinated with the local utility company, and completed designs necessary for the environmental review. As required by the State Quality Environmental Review Act, or SEQR, we performed a comprehensive environmental analysis which looked at wetlands, floodplains, threatened species, and many other items that Yves Mancuso, our civil engineer from Brooker Engineering, will be speaking about shortly. We designed this system to be over 70 feet away from any residential property lines. This is a requirement of the town of Stony Point. And while the school district is not required to comply with the town's requirements, the school district wanted to be good neighbors and made sure we maintain this buffer. No trees will be removed within the buffer. The entire array will be enclosed with a 6-foot fence, and along the south side of the fence, we will have hedge-type slats to screen the array from the neighbors to the south. We are also adding about 45 evergreen trees along that south side to further reduce any visual impact of the array. This next image shows a close-up of the array. We located the transformer, inverters, and access gate on the north side of the school building, again, to minimize the impact to the neighbors. We also have a detail of the panel racks in the upper right-hand corner that shows the spacing of the panels and their 25-degree slope. This next image shows the dark color of the panels in the upper left-hand corner and the type of support rack in the bottom right-hand corner. The panels will start about 6 feet off the ground and rise to a height of about 8 feet 4 inches. This next slide shows some views that we created. Back in March, there were a few concerns from some of the neighbors to the south regarding how much of this array would be visible? What would we see from their property? And we have produced two simulations that show the solar panels will have very little visual impact. This view shows where our views were taken from, and we modeled the landscape, the 6-foot fence, the panels, all to show what it would look like from the two neighbors that are closest to the array. On the bottom, you'll see a section through the property, and it shows how the site slopes to the north and west, away from the residences on the south, and that this 6-foot fence and some landscaping will hide most of the array. This first simulation is from 9 Concord Drive. Due to the existing grade, there's a natural berm that rises and then descends again before it gets to the array. We believe this berm will mask the entire solar array, as well as the fence, which can't be seen in this simulation. Only the tops of the new evergreens can you see from this particular view. These images were all created with a computer model and did not require us to walk on these adjacent properties. This next image is from 7 Concord Drive. Only the tops of the first row of panels may be visible over the fence and between the trees. We expect these trees will hide the panels fully within a short amount of time. I'll now turn the presentation over to our civil engineer, Eve Mancuso from Brooker Engineering, to review some of the environmental studies that were performed.
Thank you, Michael. Good evening, everyone. As mentioned, I'm Eve Mancuso. I'm with Brooker Engineering, and we are the project civil engineers as well as surveyors. Michael, I can't see your screen, so if you could just give me the drawing number that's shown. I have my drawings on my desk here. So,
okay, this is drawing C100, the first slide.
Okay.
Your slide number 8 in the package.
Okay.
Showing C101 right now, Michael.
I'm
C101, yeah.
I was going to say my first should be C101. Does that make sense?
That is correct. Sorry about that.
Okay. Okay, very good. Thank you. On C101, this sheet shows the general layout of the array, as Michael had stated. The array is shown by the heavier, I'll describe them as sort of the heavier stripes that are located to the west of the existing structure. The thin line with the circles through it is what's representing the fence that would be around the perimeter of the property. To the north and to the west, the property does have wetlands located on it. We are respecting the wetlands and also proposing a buffer, so we're not affecting or not encroaching into the wetlands at all. On the south side of the property, we've respected a 70-foot setback. You see there's a 30-foot side yard, 60-foot side setback,
Right.
and a 70-foot dimension from the nearest property line to the outside of the fence. All of the development in terms of the array footprint will take place within the confines of that fence. As was mentioned by Michael, the fence will be 6 foot high, and on the southern side of the property, the fence will be screened. So there'll be no opportunity to look through the fence at that point. It'll be a green infill. Can we go to the next one, Michael?
Sure.
Okay, thank you. C102 is now the grading and drainage plan. And as was mentioned, there's an existing knoll behind one of the properties that will remain. The grading of the site very closely resembles the existing grading that is there now. And that's done for 2 reasons. Of course, to minimize the disturbance and to also minimize the soil movement, number of trucks coming and going on the property, but to best protect the surrounding land as well. The drainage design includes a very nominal green type of infrastructure that's on the north and west of the property, right by the exterior of the proposed fence line. And that's simply going to be a swale with an underground pipe. The amount of stormwater runoff will be net zero, which means that there will not be any increase in runoff. There isn't much of a hard surface proposed, but there is a slight increase in hard surface in terms of a concrete pad for the mechanical equipment. And there will be a very small gravel access drive. That's shown on your plan. If you look at the area to the north of the existing building, coming off from the existing parking area, that is where the proposed gravel access to the mechanical pad will be located. So as you can see, it's quite a distance away from the residences to the south. Next sheet, Michael. What do we have as the next one?
This is L1, your last slide. The
Okay.
landscape plan.
Yep, thank you very much. Again, to assist in buffering the residential properties to the south, we have retained a landscape architect who's prepared this plan on behalf of you. And the landscape buffer will supplement the trees that are to remain along the southern property line. If you're looking at that landscape plan, it's marked L-1. The lighter shaded trees, or circles as they're designated on the plan, are the existing trees to remain. The darker colored circles are the proposed trees that are going to infill and supplement the existing trees to remain. If anyone has walked along that property line, of the southern part of the property line, you'll realize that there's very little underbrush. There's, of course, a wooded area, very little underbrush. So these proposed evergreens will supplement the existing deciduous trees and provide a very nice buffer, that dense buffer to supplement existing trees and also the proposed fence that is going to be just north of the row of the evergreen buffers. What the landscape architect has presented is a sample of the type of vegetation that he's proposing. So it's holly and spruce and cypress, different types of vegetation. Okay, is that the last of my screens, Michael?
That is, Eve. Do you want to talk a bit
Okay.
about seeker?
So what I'd like to talk about next is the secret process. And I believe if everyone has a chance to look at their Dropbox, as you may remember, first time around, we submitted a Part 1 environmental assessment form. Part 1 is defined project and setting, and that was already submitted to you. As a result of that Part 1, the school board declared themselves lead agency, and that's why we're now proceeding as we are with a Part 2. Part 2 environmental assessment form is the identification of potential project impacts. So if you'd like, I can go through the Part 2 in summary and hit upon those items that we had marked with the check mark in the yes box, and I can refer to it so you can follow along by page number. So we're looking at Part 2, full environmental assessment form. I'm on page 1. So impact on land.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm looking for the presentation, the document that you expect us to.
It should be in your Dropbox, and it's labeled Part
Eve, I
2.
don't think the board has reviewed the entire Dropbox file yet. That was just transferred today.
No,
So
we haven't.
perhaps you could just inform everyone.
Okay,
as
so
to
I'll
the-
just, sure, I can do that. I'll read through it for you, and then when you have the opportunity, You can go back and read it, and if you have any questions, you can certainly submit questions or call me and we can address them. Because the process will be to review part 2 this evening, listen to the questions from the board, listen to questions from the public, and then address all of those questions and present a part 3. And that the part 3 will come at a later date. So right now we should really focus on the part 2, which is identification of potential project impacts. So one of the impacts that are noted in this form is impact on land. And it talks about, will the proposed action involve construction on or physical alteration of land? So of course the answer is yes. And then they go a step further and they ask, will it involve construction on depth to water table is less than 3 feet? So you have different options. There's 2 options. You could say no, or there's a small impact, or you can say there will be a moderate to large impact. Within this section, we did hit that there was a small or no impact, because we will not be affecting depth of water table less than 3 feet. We will be affecting some lands on a slope greater than 15%, but that will be mitigated by regrading it. As of now, there is no exposed bedrock. There are boulders, of course, plenty of boulders. We don't anticipate bedrock within 5 feet because the soil testing has been performed and they did not encounter bedrock within 5 feet. Excavation regarding the removal of more than 1,000 tons. As I've mentioned, we're making every effort to balance the site, so we don't expect a removal, just a regrading. Will construction continue more than 1 year? Michael, I believe the time frame because construction was approximately 1 year. Am I correct in stating that?
It's less than 1 year, Eve.
Less than 1 year. So again, that's no or small impact. Will the proposed action result in erosion? And again, no to small impact. And is the project located within a coastal erosion hazard area? And again, no to small impact because it's not in that area at all. Second part of the part 2, impact on geological features. And in this instance, it talks about unusual landforms, cliffs, dunes, mineral, fossils, caves. So that's section number 2. The answer was no. Section number 3, impacts on water. And that talks about wetlands, surface water, streams, ponds, rivers. So the answer to that is yes. And then similar to what we did previously, there's a list of questions. So you can determine whether there's a small, no or small impact or moderate to large. All of the items in this section were marked small, no or small impact. And the questions were, will you create a new water body? Answer is no. Will you decrease a water body? Answer is no. Will you dredge a water body? No. Will there be construction within or adjoining a wetlands? No. Will it create turbidity? No. Will the proposed action include one or more intake for withdrawal of water? And the answer is no. Will the proposed action include construction of one or more outfall? No. The proposed action may cause erosion or other source of discharge. That answer would be small because we are doing construction upstream of a wetland. So that potential exists, but that will be mitigated during construction. And I'll get to the mitigation features later. Will the action affect water quality? And the answer is no. Will the action involve pesticides or herbicides? No. And will the action expand or create new, like it says, construction of new or expansion of existing treatment facilities? The answer is no. Moving on to section 4, impact on groundwater. There's no impact on groundwater, so the no box was checked. We move on to number 5, impact on flooding. No box was checked. Move on to number 6, impact on air. No box was checked. We go to number 7, impact on animals and plants. So the yes box was checked. And the reason for that was after the part 1 was submitted to the DEC and what we call an EAF mapper analysis was performed, there were answers to the questions that came back for potential impact. So that's why the yes was checked. So it says, action on endangered species, and it was small impact, no to small impact. Degradation of habitat used by rare species, answer is no. Action may cause reduction in population of any species of concern, answer is no. Proposed action will result in reduction or degradation of habitat by species of special concern. So the answer is no. Proposed action diminish the capacity of a registered national natural landmark. No. Action may result in removal of or ground disturbance of any portion of a significant community. No. Proposed action may substantially interfere with nesting, breeding, foraging. And the answer is no. Proposed action requires conversion of more than 10 acres of forest. And the answer is no. And the proposed action involves the use of herbicides or pesticides. And the answer is no. And number 8, impact on agricultural resources. Since there's no agricultural resources present, the answer to that section is no. Impact on aesthetic resources. The land use of the proposed action are different from or in contrast to the current land pattern. So that section, number 9, I marked yes. Reason being is that it's currently undeveloped. So any development would change the character of the land. If you go through the questions here, will the proposed action be visible from a designated federal, state, or local scenic resource? No. Will the proposed action result in obstruction, elimination, or significant screening or one of the more officially designated scenic view? No. Is the action visible from publicly accessible vantage points? No. The situation or activity in which viewers are engaged while viewing the proposed action is routine travel by residents? No. Recreation or tourism-based activities? No. In our particular instance, the activity is only viewed from the adjacent neighbors, not the general public or general residents traveling in the area. Will the action cause a diminishment of public enjoyment of the designated resource? No. Are there similar projects in the following distance? And it lists distance from 0 miles to 5 miles. And that answer is no also. So if you're still with me, we're moving on. Number 10, impact on historic and archaeological resources. The answer there is yes. Again, went through all of the questions that are listed in that section 10. The proposed action may occur wholly or partially within contiguous to buildings, archaeological sites, or district, which is on the National Register, or New York State Office of Parks, Recreation and Historic Preservation. So in this instance, that box was checked no or small impact. As when we did the EAF mapper, there was the Camp Bullowa that popped up. Camp Bullowa is far west of the proposed development area. This is a small letter B now. The proposed action may occur wholly or partially within or substantially contiguous to an area designated of sensitive for archaeological sites. That again popped up on the mapper, but I'll respond to that after we're finished going through the part 2. I'll give you the mitigation or the responses to each one with the documents that we have. The proposed action will occur partially or within substantially contiguous, not listed on the SHPO site. And the answer there is no. The proposed action may result in the destruction or alteration of all or part of the site. And, oh, that's on sheet 7. No, I'm out of the section. So number 10 is complete, and we've responded to all those questions. Now I'm on section 11. Impact on open space and recreation. Will the proposed action result in loss of recreational opportunities? So the answer there is no, and there's no further questions to answer in that section. And number 12 is impact on critical environmental areas. Is the action located within or adjacent to a critical environmental area? And the answer is no. Impact on, we're up to number 13, impact on transportation. Will the proposed action result in a change to existing transportation systems? The answer is no. Number 14, impact on energy. Will the proposed action cause an increase in use of any form of energy? Answer is no. Number 15, the impact on noise, odor, and light. Will the proposed action result in increase in noise or outdoor lighting? And the answer is no. Impact on human health. Will the proposed action have any impact on human health from exposure to new or existing sources of contaminants? And the answer there is no. Number 17, consistency with community plan. Is the proposed action consistent with adopted use plan? Oh, well, it's phrased in a different way. Is the proposed action not consistent with adopted plans? So I answered no. And number 18, is the proposed project inconsistent with community character? And in that instance, I answered yes, only because that particular area is a residential area, and this particular section of the property is wooded. So to item F, it's is the proposed action inconsistent with the character of the existing landscape? And in that instance, I checked off the box moderate to large impact, because as you know, the nature of a solar array requires the removal of the vegetation within the footprint of the development of the array. So though we are staying within the confines of the fence for the footprint of the array, and all the existing vegetation around it will remain, it still changes the character. So I don't know if you want to stop and have any questions on this, or should I move right into the DEC report now?
I think you can summarize the DEC report. You went through most of those in the part 2. So
Correct.
if you can summarize what our findings were on the DEC report, and then we can open it up to questions.
Okay, that'd be great. So now, when the school board declared themselves lead agency, the document was sent to the DEC, New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, and they did their review, and they came back with a few items. And part of the obligation as the lead agency is to take a hard look at all of the items that were brought up by the DEC and that were brought up in part 2, and that may or may not be brought up by anyone who wishes to participate from the public. So in the DEC review letter, They note that there is a wetland on the property, and yes, we agree, the wetland is delineated, and the delineation is shown on the plan. It is north and west of the subject development, and we did have an environmental scientist delineate the wetland, Peter Torgerson, and to date, the DEC now has confirmed that the delineation of the wetland is accurate. We recently received that feedback from the DEC, so now we will proceed with paperwork to submit to the state for a permit. Second issue the DEC brought up was water quality certification. This is an Army Corps permit. As we are not disturbing the wetlands at all, I believe the Army Corps will be waiving this requirement, but we will make a submission to the Army Corps jointly with the DEC and get their feedback, which, as I mentioned, we expect to be a waiver. Next item is state listed species. 3 different species came up. Bald eagle, northern long-eared bat, and timber rattlesnake. They're all status threatened. The DEC in their letter said regarding the bald eagle that based on the location, the department has determined the project is not likely to impact eagles. No further review is necessary. The next one on northern long-eared bat, to mitigate any, to avoid any adverse impacts on the northern long-eared bat, the DEC stated that all tree removal must take place from November 1 to March 31st, and we agree to that. That's not going to be a problem. With regard to timber rattlesnake, we did have our environmental scientist, Mr. Peter Torgerson, do an evaluation of the site. And in short, he did submit a letter, and that's in the Dropbox if you'd like to read it in detail. But essentially, he said that the site does not support habitat for timber rattlesnakes. Next item for the DEC was the State Pollution Discharge Elimination System, which is a SPEEDIES permit. And yes, we do agree that we will prepare a SWIP, which is a separate stormwater pollution prevention plan. And yes, we will prepare that and submit that. Next is cultural resources. And a study was performed by a consultant, Tectonic, and their full report is in the Dropbox. And in summary, they say that based on the archaeological assessment and lack of artifacts, no further testing is recommended. So they pretty much did their tabletop evaluation plus on-site testing. Next is FEMA floodplain. Again, in the Dropbox, I've provided a firm panel, flood insurance rate map panel, and it shows that there is no floodplain within the project area. The nearest floodplain is over by the Lake Boyce area, which is in Camp Bullowa. And lastly is local waterfront revitalization. And the town does have a local waterfront revitalization plan, but we are nowhere near that area. That area really centers on the Hudson River. And again, in the Dropbox, there is a zoning map that shows you the location of the site with regard to where those zoning districts are located. So, all that information, and any other questions you have, the next process that will follow would be a Part 3 environmental assessment form. And in the Part 3, the school board will evaluate everything that's presented, and that's the response document that will be prepared and submitted for your review. And if you determine that there are any impacts that need further evaluation, you have the option to state that. Or if you feel that the mitigation offered offsets any potential impact, any potential adverse impact, then you can do what they call a negative declaration. That essentially says, yes, you acknowledge that there is some impact, but due to the mitigation that the project has presented in terms of buffering and in terms of the fence and in terms of the trees and making sure that the removal of the trees is outside of the area so it wouldn't adversely affect bats, and it's outside of the November to March timeframe. And the board can take all of those mitigations into consideration. And the response document then is what they call a Part 3 evaluation. So that's a lot of information to absorb. Sorry. So if you have any questions, and I'm sure you're bound to have questions either now or maybe later, feel free to ask.
Thank you, Eve.
Sure.
Hi, this is Debbie Gaddy. I am wondering about drainage because I don't want there to be any issues with the property owners. So I believe, if I'm looking at this picture correctly, that the property owners are sitting below the tree line. Correct?
Debbie,
Actually, sorry, Michael, do you want to answer that?
I'll start, Eve, and then I'll turn it over to you. So the
Okay.
property owners on the south, which is the bottom of the drawing that you're looking at right now, are actually at a higher elevation. So the site slopes from the south to the north and west. And so all drainage, all surface water will be flowing towards the wetlands. And Eve, do you want to fill in on that as well?
Michael,
Sure, I
can
think-
you just orient me to where the wetlands are, please?
Yes, so the wetlands are along the west side of the array and the north side of the array. There is a line, let's see, it's clear on this drawing, the C102 drawing. The wetlands line, I'm not sure you can see my pointer, but it's the line that runs about 50 feet off of the fence of the array on the
Okay.
west. And then it runs zigzags along the north of the array. And then there's another line that we're going to use as a buffer, about 50 feet off the wetland line, that we're going to not touch that area. But we're not going into the wetlands at all, which is on the north and west side of the array.
Okay, so the north and west side is lower than the property owners at the south.
That is correct.
And any drainage is going towards the wetlands.
That's correct. Yeah, so that's the way the natural flow of the surface water is in this region, and that's why those are wetlands, because all of the surface water flows to the north and creates that wetland over there.
Okay, and so is there anything that could be potentially hazardous in the solar panels or the batteries for the solar panels or whatever that we need to worry about?
Well, there are no batteries as part of this project. So the solar panels are really just silicon in glass, and they're inert. There's no moving parts. And there are wires that connect the panels, electrical wires, and most of them are buried below ground. So there's really no hazardous materials whatsoever being brought onto the site. And then Eve, do you want to comment about any drainage off of the site? We are collecting stormwater in the French drain. Is that correct, Eve?
Yes, that's correct. So underneath the panels, the ground is going to be pervious, meaning that it'll be vegetation. So any of the water that runs off of the panel will first drop down to the ground, which is going to be a dense vegetation in terms of a ground cover. It's not going to be, of course, shrubs or trees because it's under the solar panel, but it's not going to be grass because the property
Okay,
maintenance of it will be important. So
okay,
as the water comes off the panel, it's going to be flowing through first the dense vegetation that's under the panel. And then as it approaches the wetlands, I have a secondary means to capture it, which is going to be a swale with a pipe. But what's most important is you want to maintain the water going to the wetlands. You don't want to dry out the wetlands. You want to maintain the character of it. So after it's filtered through these vegetative means, it will return back to the wetlands.
okay, thank you.
Michael, it's Peggy. I know there's residents to the south, but are there any to the west and north?
To the west, it's pretty much non-residential. There are residents 500 or 600 feet to the north that, with all the wooded area, they will not be able to see this array at all. But they're quite far away, and it's really the residents to the south that, we're within 70 feet from their property line to the fence that we were most concerned about. And that's why we put all that design effort into doing those visualizations and making sure that that fence has a hedge type of slat, so it'll look like a dense hedge, and then we'll add some evergreens outside of that. So it really should shield almost all of the array and make it look like sort of a natural element in the woods.
Right, but if there are residents 500 feet away, there's the wetlands between us and them.
Mhm. Yep.
That's correct, yeah.
Yep.
And so you don't anticipate there being a greater wetland or anything affecting them by being more water or something like that?
No, the requirement,
There's
and
actually a
you can
street
elaborate on
between.
it. The requirement is that we do not increase the runoff at all. So that's why we have this detention area along the wetlands to not increase the runoff to the wetland, but you don't want to stop the runoff. You want to protect the natural state, and that's what what Eve has designed. Is that correct,
Okay.
Eve?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Peggy.
I have a question on the tree line. Naturally the sun is optimal from the southern direction, and there's a tree line on top of the berm. All right, if you're leaving those large trees there, how did the panels get the advantage of the direct sunlight?
That's an excellent question, Robert. We spent a great deal of time and did a lot of modeling to not only take into consideration the shade that one set of panels would place on another set of panels, but also we had Brooker Engineering survey the trees and the heights of the trees. So we have all the heights of the trees to the south, and a lot of the existing trees that are very tall will be removed. However, the trees within the buffer, we didn't want to touch, and there are some very tall trees there that will provide some periodic shade onto the array, but based on the size of the array, our engineer who did the shading and the yield analysis has determined that our annual production will be pretty much what we would expect with the amount of solar panels that we have. And there's really not we did ask him to look at if all those trees in the buffer were removed, and there wasn't a significant difference. So we'd prefer not to remove any trees in the buffer, even the taller ones, if that answers your question, Robert.
Yes, it does. And then it brings another point to the surface. Do any of the panels yield a production with normal UV light? Let's say the sun is behind a cloud. Do these panels produce anything during ambient UV light without direct?
Yes, Robert. Most solar panels will still produce a little bit of energy even on a cloudy day, although we like to have a real sunny day, and we like to have those panels, right at noontime where they'll generate the most energy they can.
Michael, we're guaranteed a certain yield production each year. by the vendor, correct? On a descending scale,
Well, the vendor guarantees the production for 18 years.
18
So
years.
that-
On a descending scale, is that correct? Meaning, year one, it can produce 1,000. Year two, it might do 950. Is that how that works, or total production?
It's really a total production. So one year you may get more energy and one year you may get less energy. But
But my question is this, is for each year, are we assured a certain amount of energy production? If it doesn't meet that requirement, it's made up to us in a credit, similar to a home solar system, that it's on a declining scale. But they say this year you should get this, year two is going to be less, but we're going to assure you this up to 95%. And if it doesn't meet that term, then they make up the difference. Is there something like that?
that is correct. That's part of the guarantee. It does get normalized based on weather. So, each year is a little different based on how much sunlight there is, and it varies from year to year. So that is a number that you can calculate based on the weather data that we get. And so those guarantees are there, and there will be enough energy over the 18 years that will pay for the system. That's how these energy performance contracts work. After the 18 years, it's really just free electricity, and these panels generate energy for 25, 30 years.
Oh, great. Thank you.
I go back to my question on the tree line again. So that was kind of a question during the midsummer, and when the sun is lower in the winter, they took that observation of the height of the trees during even a winter approach.
That's correct, Robert. They use a software called Helioscope, and there's a few different software packages out there. But
Okay.
those packages do look at the solar angles over a full year, and obviously you generate less solar energy in the winter time. But interestingly, you do generate more energy on the shoulder seasons, the spring and the fall, because the panels are more efficient in the cooler weather. When it gets really hot, even though they have more direct sunlight, they sometimes don't generate as much energy.
I remember.
Okay, this is Jim. Hi.
Hi, Jim.
As long as we're doing all the technical, I'm more curious than anything else. These are deciduous trees, I take it, primarily, which would have their leaves down, and obviously in the fall and winter, part of the spring. Do they I assume they also factor that into the model?
Absolutely.
You'll get more sunlight hitting the panels. I understand the sun's angle, etc.
Right. Absolutely, Jim. When we give them the tree heights, we also give them the species, whether they're deciduous or evergreen.
Yeah. Okay. It's interesting. Thank you. Next.
Thank you.
Chris, do you have any questions from the public?
Yes, we do have a couple of questions. We have one from Margaret Dwyer, 2 Penny Lane, Tompkins, Cove. And the question is, I would like to know the effect of a leased solar farm has on the resale value of a home. And then a follow-up, what effect might it have on the appraisal of our home? And has a solar sitting analysis been performed?
Well, as far as the property value impact, we can't really respond to that one, but we did do all the environmental studies that are required of this particular project. And now, Mr. Seno, do you want to address the appraisal values of the nearby properties?
Well, the only thing that I can say is that, it's our property. As far as the work that you did is looking at the pictures, and it doesn't seem to be a detriment to the houses. We are not the assessor of Stony Point, and we do not figure out what the assessments would be before or after such a project. So I do not know the answer to that question.
Okay.
There was a second part about an assessment. Chris, can you read just the last part of that question?
Sure. has a solar sitting analysis been performed?
Yeah, I think that's a siting analysis that they may be.
Siting, I'm
referring-
sorry, yes, yep.
And typically, that's only required for utility scale projects when you do power plants. This size array, 1.3 megawatts, is within what the town would regulate normally, and is not required to do any siting analysis. The DEC does require us to do this full environmental impact that Ms. Mancuso had just reviewed with all of you. And that's the limit of our analysis.
Okay, we have a couple of questions from Edward Lenore from 5 Concord Drive, Stony Point. First one is, where is the information on this proposed project posted?
We have put all of the drawings and this presentation and the details in a Dropbox folder and shared that with the school district. And the district can make that available to the public.
We'll most likely post it on our webpage.
Yes.
Next question is, has an environmental study been completed? And then where can that study be accessed, if so?
So that study is also in the Dropbox. It's the documents that Eve Mancuso has walked all of you through. There's typically 3 parts to the environmental assessment form, part 1, part 2, and part 3, which is in draft format and will address any of the questions that we hear tonight, as well as the previous questions that came up from DEC.
Okay. And then final question, will any trees on the south side be removed outside of the fence?
There will be some trees outside of the fence that will be removed, but no trees within the 70-foot buffer will be removed.
And that was the final question.
And I believe that Dropbox was just shared with us today, so we will be putting those documents, like Dr. Falosello said, on our webpage under the board's tab for the public's examination.
Okay.
We have one more question that just popped up.
Okay.
It's from Kerry Leitner from 7 Concord Drive. The view you're showing from 7 Concord Drive is from ground level. What will we see from the second level? I see the trees they have marked to take down. Hold on one second. I just need to move over. And they're coming right up to the property.
Yeah, those trees that are marked are not coming down. The trees in the buffer, as I mentioned previously, will not be removed. So to answer the first part of the question, I think, is what would you see from the second floor? So obviously you'll see a little bit more of the panel. However, we believe with the evergreens that we're adding, they're 8 to 10 feet when we plant them, and they should shield most of the array from the neighbors.
Okay, and that is the final question.
Okay. Is any other questions from the board? All right. I want to thank you very much, Eve and Mr. Shalali, and that was a very thorough and productive presentation. We will post that on our website for the audience. And at this point, if there's no further questions, I'd like to go into the next agenda item. Okay, retirements.
Mike and Ms. Mancuso, thank you for joining us. We don't want to hold you up the rest of the night. I'm sure we'll see you next time for the part 3.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Have a great evening.
You
Thank
too.
you.
Sure. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Eckert. So, okay, we're in.
Henri Maureen Degnan.
All right, that's the first one. So, if you wouldn't mind, Mr.
Yes.
Please, thank you.
Judy and Robert, before you go on, I probably could say goodbye to Judy too. We don't need to hold you up any further. The rest is just our regular board meeting. So thank you for joining us tonight, Judy.
Okay, and have we closed on public session for that period of time?
Mhm.
Okay, I might not have said that. Okay, very good. Okay, Mr. Fernandez, please.
Whereas Ms. Maureen Degnan has served at Norfolk Central School District with dedication for a total of 30 years, and where she has submitted her resignation for retirement purposes, therefore be it resolved, the Board of Education, upon the recommendation of the superintendent of school, hereby accepts with deep regret the resignation of Maureen Degnan, special education teacher, effective June 26, 2020, and be it further resolved that the Board of Education wishes Ms. Degnan and her family much happiness in the future.
Okay, may I have a second by the whole board? Everyone unmuted?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay,
Second.
Yes.
and any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Congratulations, Mrs. Degman. If you're watching, we wish you a very happy and healthy retirement. Mr. Craig, you have the
I am not seeing that in front of me, so
Okay.
you have to slide on here.
no problem. Peggy, you have?
I don't have it either, Robert.
All right.
No, I'll do it.
Does anyone have it? Ida, you mentioned? Okay.
Yeah, I have.
Ida, please.
Jilsa Karan, whereas Miss Jilsa Karan has served the North Rockland Central School District with dedication for a total of 34 years and 5 months, and whereas she has submitted her resignation for retirement purposes, therefore be it resolved that the Board of Education, upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, hereby accepts with deep regret the resignation of Jilsa Karan, teaching assistant, effective June 26, 2020, and be it further resolved that the Board of Education wishes Ms. Karan and her family much happiness in the future.
All right. May I have a second by the entire board?
Yes.
Yes.
Any? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion passes 7-0. And Mrs. Karan, if you're watching, we wish you a very healthy and happy retirement. And good luck. Okay, we're going to non-instructional retirements. And who would like to volunteer to read Maria Greco?
I'll do
I can read-
Mrs. Greco.
Okay, go ahead, Debbie.
All right.
Thank you, Mary. Whereas Ms. Maria Greco has served the North Rockland Central School District with dedication for a total of 24 years and 2 months, and whereas she has submitted her resignation for retirement purposes, therefore be it resolved that the Board of Education, upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, hereby accepts with deep regret the resignation of Maria Greco, teacher aide, effective June 30th, 2020, and be it further resolved that the Board of Education wishes Ms. Greco and her family much happiness in the future.
All right, may I have a second by the whole board?
Yes.
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 Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion passes 7-0. Ms. Greco, if you're watching, we wish you a very healthy, happy retirement, and good luck in the future. Okay, at this point, we're at the consent agenda. Just like to read, the use of a consent agenda permits the Board of Education to make more effective use of time by adopting a single motion to cover those relatively routine matters which are included. Any member of the board who wishes to discuss a particular piece of business on the consent agenda may so indicate that item and will be transferred to the regular agenda for consideration and a separate vote, thus preserving the right of all board members to be heard on any issue. So may I have a motion on the consent agenda
So move.
by Deborah and second?
Ida.
Ida.
Second,
Okay. And all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we are going to adjourn into executive session.
Robert, just to, there might be a few of the appointees that are with us this evening. I'm not sure.
Thank
But
you.
if it's okay with you, Robert, can I just read the names of the people that were appointed under consent agenda?
Yes, thank you. Please do that.
Sure. So under the non-instructional side, I'd like to congratulate Carolyn Murrell, who'll be joining us as a part-time certified occupational therapist assistant. Mr. Christopher Guerra, who will be joining us at the end of July as a maintenance supervisor. And then also Anthony Altro, who is currently a custodial worker at West Haverstraw, who is recently now being promoted to a custodian 1 also at West Haverstraw. And then on the instructional side, wanted to congratulate Kara Moran. Kara Moran will be going back to Fieldstone as a probationary social studies teacher. Jessica Gonsalves, who will be joining the district as a speech and language therapist, working at Haverstraw and West Haverstraw Elementary Schools. Victoria Gracia will be joining us as a ESL teacher, special subject ENL, at Thiels Elementary School. And then finally, Christina Lopez will also be joining us in the ENL department at West Haverstraw Elementary School. So congratulations to Carolyn, Christopher, Anthony, Kara, Jessica, Victoria, and Christina.
Yes, welcome.
Thank you very much, Mr. Beard. It's very important that we announce those congratulations. And now we're moving into adjournment, into executive session, personnel matters, and we'll return for a special meeting afterwards.
No, actually, Robert, that was it. That was the meeting.
That was the meeting. That's it.
Yeah,
Yeah. All those items have been discussed